Intro music, a slow, thoughtful piece of Americana music with a hint of melancholy. Visuals of black and white photos of German POWs in camps across the United States. They are shown working on farms, behind barbed wire, their faces a mixture of youth, defiance, and uncertainty. Narrator, in the heart of America, during the darkest days of World War II, a different kind of battle was being fought. Far from the shell-shocked fields of Europe, on the sun-baked plains of Texas and the fertile farmlands of the Midwest, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers lived out the war as prisoners. They were the enemy, the captured remnants of a fearsome war machine, now living on American soil. Footage of a train carrying POWs pulling into a small, dusty town. Townspeople watch with suspicion and anger. Narrator. For the small towns that hosted these POW camps, it was a source of constant tension. How do you treat the men who, just weeks before, were trying to kill your sons, your brothers, and your husbands? For the American soldiers assigned to guard them, it was a difficult, often thankless job. The war had taught them to hate the uniform. But now they were tasked with guarding the men inside them. A shot of a stern-looking American guard watching over a line of German prisoners. Narrator. This is the story of one of those camps. But more than that, it's the story of a young woman who found herself caught in the middle, a bridge between two worlds that wanted nothing more than to destroy each other. Her name was Anna Schmidt, and her German last name in a time of war made her an object of suspicion. She believed in her country and its values, but she was about to discover that the lines between right and wrong, between cruelty and kindness, were not as clear as the barbed wire fences. This is a story about the power of truth, and how sometimes the most profound weapon of war isn't a bullet or a bomb, but a simple taste of a world the enemy never knew existed. Music swells and fades into the sound of a hot Texas wind and the distant clank of metal. The heat of a Texas summer was a physical thing. It pressed down on Camp Concordia, a sprawling, hastily built prisoner-of-war camp that shimmered in the relentless sun. The dust, fine as flour, coated everything. The wooden barracks, the barbed wire fences, and the souls of the men who lived there. For the German prisoners of the Africa Corps, the heat was familiar, but the suffocating humidity was a new kind of misery. For the American guards, it was just another reason to be irritable. In the small, stuffy office of the administration building, Corporal Anna Schmidt felt the heat more than most. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the icy stares and whispered comments that followed her wherever she went. Anna was a translator, a vital link between the English-speaking guards and the thousands of German-speaking prisoners. She was also a Schmidt. Her parents had immigrated from Germany before the First War, and while she was as American as baseball and apple pie, her last name was a brand, a permanent mark of suspicion. She kept her head down, focusing on the stack of documents on her desk. Prisoner transfer requests, censored mail, supply requisitions. She did her job with a quiet efficiency that was impossible to fault, hoping that competence would eventually overcome prejudice. But hope was in short supply at Camp Concordia. Schmidt! The voice boomed from the doorway, thick with contempt. It belonged to Sergeant Frank Miller, the non-commissioned officer in charge of the guard details. Miller was a hard man, a product of the Great Depression and a dozen dirty jobs before the Army gave him a uniform and a sense of power. He saw the world in simple terms, us versus them. And to him, Anna, with her fluent German and her quiet demeanor, was dangerously close to being one of them. "Yes, Sergeant?" Anna said, not looking up from her work. "Major Davis wants to see you." "Now," Miller grunted. He lingered in the doorway, his large frame blocking the light. "And try to look like an American soldier when you talk to him, not some Fräulein sympathizer." Anna's knuckles whitened as she gripped her pen. She took a slow, deep breath, counted to 3, and then stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from her uniform. She walked past him without a word, her back straight, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. The walk to the camp commandant's office was a short one, but it felt like a mile under the weight of the camp's oppressive atmosphere. Major Davis was a man drowning in paperwork. He was a bureaucrat in a soldier's uniform, more concerned with regulations and reports than with the men under his command, be they American or German. He looked up at Anna over his spectacles, his expression one of weary annoyance. "Corporal," he began, "Sergeant Miller tells me you've been conversing with the prisoners, beyond your official translation duties." "I speak to them when they have questions about camp rules, sir," Anna replied, her voice steady. "Or when they have concerns about the mail? It helps maintain order." "Miller seems to think it's fraternization," Davis said flatly. "He's concerned it undermines discipline. He says you're too familiar with them." "Sir, I am never familiar," Anna said, a spark of defiance in her tone. "I am professional. Treating prisoners with a basic level of human dignity is not fraternization. It is in accordance with the Geneva Convention. It is also the most effective way to ensure their cooperation." Major Davis sighed, polishing his glasses with a handkerchief. "Look, Schmidt, Miller is a good NCO. He keeps the prisoners in line. His methods may be direct, but they work. He's worried your approach sends the wrong message. That we're soft. Are we, sir?" Anna asked quietly. "Or are we civilized? Isn't that what we're fighting for?" The question hung in the air, an uncomfortable truth that Davis had no interest in confronting. "Your job is to translate documents, Corporal, not to set camp policy. Stay away from the prisoners unless you are specifically ordered to interact with them. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," Anna said, her voice tight. The injustice of it burned in her chest. She was being punished for doing her job too well, for seeing the prisoners as human beings, which in the eyes of men like Miller and Davis was a crime. She walked out of the office and nearly collided with Miller, who was waiting just outside the door, a smug look on his face. "See, Schmidt," he said in a low voice, "the Major knows how things ought to be run. These men aren't our guests. They're the enemy. They're Nazis. And the only thing a Nazi understands is a boot on the neck. You do well to remember that, unless you've forgotten which side you're on." He walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. The accusation, the constant insinuation that she was disloyal, was a poison that seeped into every corner of her life at the camp. Her work gave her a unique window into the lives of the prisoners. She read their letters home, filled with a strange mixture of homesickness, bravado, and creeping despair. She saw the official reports on their morale, which was plummeting. The men were listless, cynical, and increasingly resistant to authority. Miller's harsh methods, collective punishment for minor infractions, short rations, and verbal abuse, were not breaking their spirit. They were hardening it. They were breeding resentment, not compliance. Among the thousands of prisoners, Anna had taken a particular interest in 3 of them, men who represented a cross-section of the German army. There was Klaus, a boy of no more than 19, with wide, terrified eyes. He'd been captured in North Africa, a replacement who had barely seen a day of combat. He was a farmer's son, lost and bewildered. Then there was Captain Richter, a Prussian officer to the bone. He was arrogant, defiant, and a true believer in the Reich. He carried himself with an air of superiority, as if being a prisoner was a temporary inconvenience. He was a leader among the men, enforcing a rigid discipline even within the confines of the barbed wire. And finally, there was Sergeant Vogel, a man in his 30s with the weary eyes of an old philosopher. He had been a university lecturer before the war. He was cynical, sarcastic, and saw the absurdity in everything. He followed orders, but with a detached irony that infuriated men like Miller. Anna believed that understanding these men was the key to managing them. But her orders were clear: stay away. So she watched from a distance. She saw Klaus being bullied by the more fanatical prisoners for his perceived weakness. She saw Richter drilling his men in the dusty compound, trying to maintain the illusion of a functioning army. And she saw Vogel, sitting alone, reading one of the few tattered books in the camp library, a silent observer of his own captivity. One sweltering afternoon, a fight broke out in the mess hall. It was a small thing, an argument over a piece of bread, but it quickly escalated into a full-blown brawl. Miller's guards waded in with batons, and by the time order was restored, several prisoners were injured. one of them seriously. The man, a young private, had a deep gash on his head. Anna was in the infirmary, translating the doctor's instructions for a German orderly, when they brought the injured man in. It was Klaus. His face was pale and slick with sweat, his eyes glazed with pain. As the doctor worked to stitch the wound, Klaus began to mutter in German, delirious with fever. "It's not enough," he whispered over and over. "Never enough food. We are starving. They told us America was weak, decadent. But they are the ones who starve their prisoners." The words struck Anna like a physical blow. Starving? The rations were monotonous and unpleasant, but they were adequate. Intro music with a recap of Part 1. The tense atmosphere of Camp Concordia, Anna's clash with Sergeant Miller, her failed proposal, and her subsequent punishment, ending with the shot of her writing a letter to the OSS. Narrator. Rejection and ridicule can be a powerful poison. For Corporal Anna Schmidt, they were a daily diet. Confined to her desk at Camp Concordia, she was an outcast, her radical idea to fight propaganda with truth dismissed as naive and dangerous. The camp remained under the iron fist of Sergeant Frank Miller, whose harsh methods only deepened the resentment of the German prisoners. The wall of hatred between captor and captive seemed to grow higher and thicker with each passing day. Visuals of Miller shouting at prisoners, and Anna watching from her office window, looking frustrated. Narrator. But an idea, once born, is a difficult thing to kill. Anna's belief that the truth could be a weapon, that a simple taste of American reality could shatter a foundation of lies, had not died. It had simply gone underground. Her letter to the Office of Strategic Services in Washington was a desperate gamble, a message in a bottle cast into the vast ocean of military bureaucracy. She had no idea if it would ever be read or if she was simply inviting more trouble. But in the suffocating silence of her punishment, it was the only move she had left to make. And it was a move that was about to change everything. Music shifts to a more hopeful, intriguing tone as the new part begins. 2 weeks passed, and for Anna, they were the longest 2 weeks of her life. The daily grind of her punishment continued. Sergeant Miller's taunts became more brazen, her isolation more complete. She began to believe her letter had been a foolish, desperate act, destined to be lost in a filing cabinet or thrown away by a dismissive clerk. She was on the verge of losing hope when the black car arrived. It was a standard-issue Army staff car, but it moved with an air of importance that was new to Camp Concordia. It rolled past the sentries without slowing and pulled up directly in front of the administration building. A captain stepped out. He was young, in his late 20s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a crisp, tailored uniform without any of the dust or sweat that clung to everyone else at the camp. He was clearly not from around here. He walked into the building and approached Anna's desk. "I'm looking for Corporal Anna Schmidt," he said, his voice quiet and direct. Before Anna could answer, Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his chest puffed out. "May I help you, Captain?" "I'm Sergeant Miller, in charge of camp security." The captain's eyes flicked to Miller for a fraction of a second before returning to Anna. "Corporal Schmidt?" he repeated. "I'm Corporal Schmidt," Anna said, standing. "Captain Evans," he said, extending a hand. "Office of Strategic Services. I believe you wrote us a letter." The color drained from Miller's face. The OSS was the stuff of whispers and rumors, America's new spy agency. They were ghosts who operated outside the normal chain of command. And they were here to see Anna Schmidt. Captain Evans ignored Miller completely. "Is there somewhere we can talk, Corporal?" "Privately?" The meeting took place in a small, unused supply room. For the first time in weeks, Anna felt a flicker of hope. Evans listened intently as she laid out her theory, not just with passion, but with facts. She quoted from the prisoners' censored letters, showing him their deeply ingrained belief in American weakness. She described the psychological impact of Miller's tactics, explaining how they reinforced the prisoners' sense of martyrdom. "Your theory is that a positive stimulus could be more effective at breaking down indoctrination than a negative one," Evans summarized, turning her argument into a clinical assessment. "Yes, sir," Anna said. "It's not about being kind. It's about being smart. It's about psychological dislocation. Their entire worldview is built on a series of lies about us. If we can prove one of those core lies is false, the entire structure begins to crumble. A hamburger is not a meal, Captain. It's a fact. It's a piece of evidence that contradicts everything they've been told. Evans was silent for a long time, studying her. Your file says you've been reprimanded for this very idea, he said. Yes, sir, Anna admitted. Major Davis and Sergeant Miller feel it undermines discipline. What they call discipline, I call a failure to gather intelligence, Evans said coolly. Their methods are producing nothing. You, on the other hand, are at least thinking. That's a rare commodity. He stood up. Your letter was compelling. Washington is prepared to authorize a small-scale, clandestine experiment. Your experiment, Corporal, Anna's heart leapt. Sir? You will select a small group of prisoners, Evans continued. You will be given a budget, within reason, and access to the necessary facilities. Sergeant Miller and Major Davis will be instructed to give you their full cooperation. They will not like it, but they will do it. This is now an OSS operation. I will be here to observe. This is your chance to prove your theory, Corporal. Do not fail. The shift in the camp's power dynamic was immediate and seismic. Major Davis was flustered and resentful at having his authority overridden. Sergeant Miller was incandescent with rage. He was forced to follow orders from a woman he despised, a corporal who had gone over his head and, in his eyes, betrayed them all. So the kraut lover gets her way, he spat at Anna in the hallway after the meeting with Evans. You're going to regret this, Schmidt. When this blows up in your face, I'll be there to watch. Anna ignored him. She had work to do. With Captain Evans's authority behind her, she selected her test subjects. She chose Klaus, the young, impressionable private. She chose Captain Richter, the arrogant true believer. If she could crack him, she could crack anyone. And she chose Sergeant Vogel, the cynical intellectual, because she knew he would see the experiment for exactly what it was. The next challenge was procuring the ingredients. This wasn't something she could get from the Army quartermaster. It had to be authentic. That meant going into the nearby town of Concordia. The town viewed the camp and its prisoners with a mixture of fear and resentment. Every family had someone serving overseas. When Anna walked into the local butcher shop in her uniform and asked for 10 pounds of fresh ground beef, the butcher, a stout man with a grim face, just stared at her. This for the camp? He asked gruffly. Yes, it is, Anna said. We all know who you are, the butcher's wife said, coming out from the back. You're that German girl from the camp. My nephew is in a German prison camp right now. I hope he's not eating ground beef. The hostility in the small shop was suffocating. This is for a special project for the United States Army, Anna said, keeping her voice calm and official. I don't sell my beef to feed Nazis, the butcher said, turning his back on her. Anna was about to leave, defeated, when the shop's bell jingled and Captain Evans walked in. He had been waiting in the jeep outside. He didn't say a word. He simply opened his jacket slightly, revealing the pistol on his hip and the official credentials pinned to his pocket. He looked at the butcher, then at his wife with his cool, appraising eyes. The Army requires 10 pounds of your best ground beef, Evans said, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. You will provide it. And you will provide it now. It is a matter of national security. They got the beef. They got the fresh-baked buns from the bakery, the potatoes and onions from the grocer, and most importantly, 24 ice-cold bottles of Coca-Cola. Each transaction was a small battle against the town's suspicion, won only by Evans's quiet, intimidating presence. The experiment was scheduled for that evening. Anna was given use of a small, separate mess hall away from the main compound. She spent the afternoon preparing. She wasn't a gourmet cook, but she knew how to make a hamburger. This was the food of her childhood, the food of picnics and county fairs. As she worked, she felt a strange sense of purpose. She was assembling her weapons, slices of American cheese, crisp lettuce, ripe tomatoes, and the secret weapon, a bottle of Heinz ketchup. Miller stood in the corner of the room, his arms crossed, watching her every move with a cynical smirk. Playing house, Schmidt? He sneered. You even got the little glass bottles. How cute, Anna didn't respond. She just focused on grilling the patties, the smell of the sizzling meat filling the small room. It was a smell of home, of normalcy, a world away from the boiled cabbage and stale bread of the prison camp. Finally, it was time. The 3 German prisoners were marched in under guard. They looked confused and suspicious. An interrogation? A new kind of punishment? They sat down at the wooden table, their faces hard and unreadable. Captain Richter sat ramrod straight, a look of utter contempt on his face. Klaus just looked terrified. Vogel observed the scene with a detached curiosity, as if he were at a particularly strange play. Anna brought the plates out herself. On each plate was a large hamburger, the cheese melted perfectly over the patty, tucked into a soft bun. Next to it was a pile of golden, crispy French fries and a small dish of coleslaw. She then placed a bottle of Coca-Cola, condensation beading on the dark glass, next to each plate. For a full minute, no one moved. The 3 Germans stared at the food as if it were an alien artifact. This wasn't a meal. It was a picture from a magazine, an impossible fantasy. "What is this?" Richter finally demanded, his voice sharp. "Some kind of American trick?" Intro music with a dramatic recap of parts 1 and 2. Anna's struggle, Miller's cruelty, the secret letter to the OSS, and the climactic scene of the German prisoners' stunned reaction to their first American hamburger. Narrator. A question can be more powerful than a command. For the German prisoners at Camp Concordia, Sergeant Vogel's whispered words, "What have we been fighting against?" hung in the air like smoke after a battle. The hamburger experiment had done more than fill their stomachs. It had planted a seed of doubt, a kernel of truth that threatened to shatter the very foundation of their ideology. The taste of American abundance was a more potent form of propaganda than anything their own leaders had ever conceived. Visuals of the 3 prisoners, looking thoughtful and confused, being led back to their barracks. Narrator. Corporal Anna Schmidt had won her first victory. Her audacious theory had been proven correct, right under the nose of the cynical Sergeant Miller and in front of the watchful eyes of the OSS. But this was only the beginning. Proving a theory was one thing. Winning the war for intelligence, changing the hardened hearts of an entire camp, and earning her own redemption was another. The revelation had begun, but the most difficult and dangerous part of her journey was still ahead. Music becomes more serious and determined, transitioning to the main story. The aftermath of the experiment was quiet, but the change in atmosphere was undeniable. Sergeant Vogel, true to his character, was the first to break. The day after the meal, he requested a meeting with Anna and Captain Evans. He walked into the small office, not with his usual cynical slouch, but with the posture of a man who had come to a difficult decision. "I wish to talk," he said in German, foregoing any pleasantries. "Not about troop movements or tank specifications. I was a lecturer, not a general. But I can tell you about the things a government does not put in its official reports." For hours, Vogel spoke. He described the growing weariness of the German people, the quiet jokes told about party officials, the disconnect between the newsreels and the reality of the ration cards. He talked about the soldiers at the front, how the initial patriotic fervor had been replaced by a grim, fatalistic desire to simply survive. Each piece of information on its own was small, but woven together they created a detailed tapestry of a nation's crumbling morale. It was pure gold for Captain Evans, an intimate look inside the enemy's psyche that no amount of battlefield intelligence could provide. Evans was impressed. "Your instincts were correct, Corporal," he said to Anna after Vogel had left. "You've opened a door we didn't even know was there." But not everyone was convinced. Sergeant Miller saw the breakthrough not as a victory, but as a threat to his authority. The story of the American meal had spread like wildfire through the camp. Prisoners would watch Anna as she walked through the compound, their expressions no longer hostile but curious. They started asking questions. They wanted to know about American farms, about factories, about the strange music they sometimes heard on the guards' radios. Miller tried to reassert his control. He cracked down, ordering more inspections, more drills, canceling the prisoners' meager recreation time. But his cruelty now seemed petty and desperate. He had lost the psychological advantage. Anna, with a simple plate of food, had accomplished what he never could with his batons and his threats. The real test, however, remained Captain Richter. The proud Prussian officer had retreated into a shell of angry silence after the meal. He refused to speak to anyone, drilling his small group of loyal followers with a renewed, frantic energy. He was a symbol of the old guard, the unbreakable Nazi spirit. For Anna's experiment to be a true success, Richter had to be broken. Anna decided on a new tactic. She knew from Richter's file that he was a highly educated man, an engineer by trade. She arranged for a selection of American magazines to be left in the camp's small library, magazines like Popular Mechanics and Life. They were filled with articles and advertisements showcasing the staggering power of American industry, new cars, gleaming refrigerators, sprawling factories, and massive construction projects like the Hoover Dam. For days, Richter ignored them. But Vogel, who now met with Anna regularly, told her that Richter was a voracious reader. It was only a matter of time. One afternoon, Anna walked past the library and glanced through the window. She saw Richter sitting alone in a corner hidden behind a stack of books. He was hunched over an issue of Life magazine, his eyes wide as he stared at a multi-page advertisement for the Ford Motor Company. The ad showed the Willow Run factory, an astonishing mile-long assembly line that was churning out a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. Anna knew she had him. The hamburger had shown him America's abundance. The magazine was showing him the terrifying, unstoppable industrial engine that powered it. It was a war he could not win, not with courage or discipline, but because he was facing a foe that could build 1,000 planes for every one of his. A week later, Captain Richter requested a meeting. He walked into the office where Anna and Captain Evans were waiting. He looked like a different man. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a profound and solemn weariness. He looked defeated. He placed the copy of Life magazine on the table between them. "I was a true believer," Richter said, his voice low and heavy. "I believed in the Führer. I believed in our destiny. I believed that our spirit, our will, was superior to your soft, decadent materialism." He tapped the magazine. "I was a fool." He then proceeded to tell them everything. He had been part of the Peenemünde Army Research Center. He was an engineer working on the guidance systems for the V-2 rocket program, Hitler's new vengeance weapon designed to terrorize London into submission. He believed it was the weapon that would win the war. "But it does not matter," Richter said, his voice hollow. "You could build 1,000 of these factories. You could lose 1,000 bombers and build 1,000 more the next day. A country that can do this," he pointed at the magazine, "and can also afford to feed its prisoners of war a meal of such quality," he struggled for the word, "cannot be defeated. It is a matter of simple mathematics. We have lost." He then drew, from memory, detailed schematics of the V-2's gyroscope system. He provided the locations of hidden manufacturing sites, the names of the lead scientists. It was an intelligence coup of staggering proportions. Evans immediately understood its significance. This information would allow Allied bombers to target the V-2 program, to disrupt it, and to save thousands of civilian lives in Britain. The information was immediately relayed to Washington. The effect on Camp Concordia was profound. Sergeant Miller was subjected to a quiet but thorough investigation by the OSS. His record of brutality, his complete failure to produce any useful intelligence, and his open hostility to a successful operation sealed his fate. He was transferred to a remote weather station in Alaska, his career in ruins. It was a quiet, bureaucratic end for a man who had ruled through noise and fear. Major Davis, ever the politician, quickly changed his tune. He now lauded Anna's unconventional but brilliant methods, taking credit for allowing the experiment to proceed. Anna didn't care. She had achieved her goal. As the war in Europe drew to a close, Camp Concordia was transformed. Under Anna's guidance, with the full backing of the OSS, it became a model for a new kind of prisoner management. The focus shifted from punishment to re-education. Prisoners were offered classes in English, American civics, and democratic principles. Anna's program was designed to fight the ideology of Nazism, to prepare these men for a return to a new, democratic Germany. Months later, a ceremony was held at the camp. The war was over, and the last of the prisoners were being repatriated. A three-star general from the Pentagon came to personally oversee the proceedings. He had been the one to receive Evans's initial report about Anna's experiment. In front of the assembled American guards and the remaining German prisoners, the general called Anna to the stage. "The history of this war will be written about great battles and famous generals," he said, his voice echoing across the parade ground. "But sometimes history is turned by small, quiet acts of courage and wisdom. Here at this camp, a new kind of weapon was deployed. It wasn't a bomb and it wasn't a tank. It was the truth." He turned to Anna. "Months ago, a young corporal had a radical idea. She believed that the best way to defeat our enemy was not to hate them, but to show them who we are. She faced ridicule and insubordination, but she held fast to her convictions. Her Burger and Coke offensive, as it became known at the Pentagon, led to an intelligence breakthrough that directly resulted in the crippling of the V-2 rocket program, saving countless Allied lives." The general unpinned a medal from his own uniform, the Legion of Merit, an award rarely given to an enlisted soldier, let alone a woman. "Corporal Anna Schmidt," he said, his voice booming, "for your service to your country, for your innovative and profoundly effective methods in the field of military intelligence, and for reminding us all that the highest value of this nation is the truth, it is my honor to present this to you." He pinned the medal to her uniform. The American soldiers, who had once scorned her, burst into applause. The German prisoners, the men whose lives she had changed, stood and applauded as well.